I lost track of the number of songs we danced to. I think it was 4 or perhaps 5, or was it 6? I suppose it doesn't matter if it was 1 or 100 because dancing with Stax was as natural as, well, as surfing. I need aqua, I said to Stax as the band was starting to play In the End by Linkin Park. Actually, I think our band made it sound better than Linkin Park ever did. Okay, she said, still dancing. Want anything? I asked her. Water would be great, she said, and I slipped away, leaving her still dancing. 2 waters, please, I shouted to the guy behind the punch table. He said something back as he handed me the 2 bottles of water. I just smiled and nodded my head. That seemed to satisfy him because he started helping someone else. When I looked back into the crowd for Stax, all I saw was a sea of bouncing, bobbing and wobbling bodies, but then I made eye contact with Fish, who was standing about 10 feet from me and grinning like a goof. He had sweat dripping off him, but then again, so did I. Oh hey Fish, I shouted, and I've no idea how he heard me. Maybe he had read my lips. He said something back to me, but I couldn't hear him at all. Even when he came up to me and shouted it right into my ear, I still couldn't hear him. I also noticed that BB wasn't with him, and I shouted into his ear, "Where's BB?" "What?" Fish shouted back. "BB?" I shouted slowly. He pointed toward the band, and I took that to mean that BB must be somewhere close to the origins of the loud music. Fish held up a finger indicating that I should wait for a minute while he got something to drink too. A moment later he and I were fighting through the crowd to get closer to the stage. I was following behind Fish and trying to keep an eye out for Stax as we moved forward. When Fish stopped, I looked ahead of us and saw that he was handing one of the cups of punch to BB. Talking was impossible, so I simply gave BB a friendly nod as a greeting, but then I saw it. BB was wearing a bright blue shirt with an equally bright red collar. I must be an open book because without anything being said, BB knew what I was thinking and smiled knowingly. "You," I mouthed. Fish looked back at me. He had a confused expression on his face. When I looked back to BB, he was waving Fish and me to follow him. I looked down and caught a quick glimpse of BB's shoes. He was wearing blue, laceless Converse, and I think my heart began beating 10 times its maximum speed. We made our way to one side of the enormous black speakers, and amazingly enough, if you aren't in front of those things, the noise level is not so bad. Oh, it was still loud, but at least we could hear ourselves think again. "Your baby, Bruce?" I asked BB. He suddenly looked nervous as he put his hand over my mouth. Yeah, it hurt, but I was in too much shock to recognize or react to the pain. BB smirked as he leaned forward to say, "I was so hoping I was right about you," and then he did something I couldn't believe. He looked around us, stepped closer to me and pulled open the front of his pants about an inch. That was all the farther he needed to pull them, because I saw exactly what he meant for me to see. BB was wearing an unmistakable, white plastic diaper with Sesame Street characters on the front. I looked at Fish, who was looking around the crowd like a jumpy Secret Service agent who's trying to protect the president from a room full of would-be assassins. Fish and I made eye contact again, and then I started looking from BB to Fish and back to BB. BB then nudged his chin knowingly toward Fish and smirked again. I looked deeply into Fish's eyes and saw the answer to my unspoken question. He was Pampers Boy from ILD.com. That is when my heart rate, which was already off the scale, surpassed the speed of light. I could actually feel my heart beating in my eardrums and eyeballs, not to mention my busted brow and lip. I guess the realization of it all got to be more than my surfer brain could process, and I felt my head beginning to feel as though it was filled with sea water. Without saying anything, Fish and BB hooked me under each arm and walked me over to the wall where I was able to rest against it. I also drank some of the water I was holding.